On our next installment of America's Hope, we focus on Samaritan's Purse operating on the ground in Maui to provide people hope in the midst of their crisis. And then we'll introduce you to two Vietnamese refugees who fled that country during the fall of Saigon. Find out how they discovered hope right here in America. All that and more on the next America's Hope. Good evening, this is America's Hope. I'm Kelly Wright. We're glad that you could join us this hour. Tonight we're focusing on finding hope in the midst of a crisis. And certainly the people in Maui in Hawaii are searching for hope in the midst of their crisis. And here on the mainland, we're all focusing on how we can provide them help as they go through the crisis of facing utter devastation. So we'll be talking to Samaritan's Purse tonight about how they're on the ground helping to facilitate hope and help. And then we'll be introducing you to two Vietnamese refugees who fled that country during the fall of Saigon. They too faced devastation of their country as well as going through a crisis, but they held on to hope and found new hope here in America. That's all next, right here on America's Hope. Tonight, we're meeting the world at a very specific point in need. As everyone's watching what's unfolding in Maui and the death toll continues to climb, the devastation is visible to all the people throughout the world. Something that unexpectedly happened without any warning has decimated an entire area. And who's on the ground working to help the people? Well, the frontline churches are, the people are, and Samaritan's Purse is also actively engaged and actively caring for the people on the ground. We're joined now by the Chief Operating Officer of Samaritan's Purse, Edward Graham. And Edward, good of you to join us this hour. This is a very difficult time, yet it's what the Samaritan's Purse is prepared to do, meet people at the point of their needs during times of crises and disasters. What's Samaritan's Purse doing on the ground there right now?
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. And you've already highlighted what the churches are doing. And our team, our assessor teams got in there immediately and started working. We actually have trained staff, our volunteers that is, in Hawaii. We were there just a few years ago with some floods. And so those volunteers that go with us all over the U.S., a couple of them are from Hawaii. So they immediately went there, started assessing the situation, working through the local church. And they were worshiping this past Sunday with those churches. And they're giving praise and glory. There's weeping. There's great mourning and loss, but these churches were celebrating. They've already begun working and helping us. And what Samaritan's Purse will come in after a storm like this, it's a firestorm. And we come in through all kinds of disaster relief, and we'll help during hurricanes and tornadoes with getting people back into their homes quickly and with rebuilds often. But in the case of a fire, everything's destroyed. And usually all the government will let us do is come in with the homeowner, and we will sift, and we will look through missing heirlooms like a ring, a wedding ring. Maybe their earrings that a grandmother, a brooch that a family member gave them, and it helps bring closure. And when there's been such great loss, there's such a need for the gospel and for hope.
So Samaritan's Purse being there to help meet those needs. How do you meet those needs physically? You've discussed what you do spiritually. How do you help them physically as well?
Yeah, well, each storm's different, and just like the story of the Good Samaritan, when we believe, and that's where we get the name Samaritan's Purse from, you know, the Samaritan bandaged, he clothed, he gave water, he gave food, he gave transportation, but the most important part of that story is that debt had to be paid, and they paid the innkeeper for that man to stay there. In Hawaii, it's difficult because we're really going to be allowed to sift. Could we provide clean drinking water? Yeah, we have desalination units, and we can provide clean drinking water. But all that has to go through the local government approval. It's a little different responding here in the U.S. So environmentally and for safety reasons, usually they only allow us to sift after a fire, and we can't go in until everything's secure. They're still looking for bodies, and unfortunately they're going to be looking for bodies for quite some time. And when all that's secure, when they get the approval, then our church volunteers will go in and they'll start working with these homeowners to help them quickly recover. Well, thanks for having us on, and we appreciate it. Please pray for Hawaii right now.
Absolutely. Edward Graham, Chief Operating Officer of Samaritan's Purse. Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
Thank you.
And from Edward Graham of Samaritan's Purse in North Carolina, we take you now to Lahaina, Hawaii, where that town's people are still dealing with the devastation from the firestorm that ravaged the area, leaving it incinerated.
Went into Lahaina and to see the town where I coach football, where we do community events and we do fundraising for all the sports groups. I was devastated. I was a wreck. I needed mental health, and I considered myself a strong leader, but it broke me. It still breaks me. This is what keeps me going, helping people. A lot of us are at that stage.
Locals were having such a hard time even getting in. There were roadblocks set up outside of Lahaina, preventing people from coming in and out of Lahaina, or coming into Lahaina perhaps. So there were much needed goods that we were basically deprived of. So people had to break the rules for us to get to this point right now. And I asked people, what would we really have right now if we didn't break those rules? People would be starving. People would be thirsty, starving, would not have clothes on their back. So this is the type of things that our community does best, is we stick together. Some of the things that's already been happening is realtors are calling families who lost everything, offering them to buy their property and their home for pennies on the dollar, just pennies on the dollar. So it's pretty offensive to us that people won't even give us the time to grieve properly. People's mental health has been diminished in all of this. They've lost everything. People have lost family members. And for them to have that disrespect to come in and already try and buy things up is out of control. So some of the things that I've been doing is gathering all of our community leaders, getting as much resources as I possibly can at the same table so we can speak on how we can prevent these land grabs from happening.
It's so painful to watch what the people are going through and what they're enduring in Lahaina after watching their town get incinerated by this firestorm. But it's also hopeful to watch how they're coming together during this time of great need. The need, as you can see, is dire. So we should offer them our prayer as well as our support. And we still have more on America's Hope. Coming up next, you'll meet two people giving their separate accounts of what it was like to flee Vietnam after the fall of Saigon. Watch their stories and see how hope has prevailed in their life. That's next. Good evening and welcome to America's Hope. I'm Kelly Wright. Around the world, people love the aroma and flavor of a good cup of coffee, right? And here in America, we're no exception to the rule. There are many popular coffee shops throughout the United States, and some of them have become a national brand. But tonight, we're going to go a little bit beyond that cup of joe to present a story of how one man's journey is more than just a story about coffee. It's a powerful narrative of hope born out of the ashes of struggle during the Vietnam War. You see, his family actually sought to flee the country and did so towards the end of that conflict. And ultimately, his family settled right here in the United States. Tuan Nguyen is the owner of Viet 5 Coffee in Chicago, who joins us now to share his life story that is filled with faith, hope, and love, and, yes, a good cup of coffee. Tuan, good to see you. How are you doing?
Hey, nice to have. Thanks for having me, Kelly. Yeah, I'm doing well. Doing great. Blessed.
Yeah, you are blessed indeed. It's my pleasure to talk to you and introduce you to America and the world, because you are, in my opinion, the epitome of hope that prevails. Tell us about your journey from Vietnam as a young child and ultimately getting here to the United States.
Yeah, my family and I are refugees from Vietnam. We escaped Vietnam on a small vessel, 45 by 15, with 55 souls on board. I was 3 at the time. My father was in the re-education camp by the communist government for 5.5 years. And on a home pass, he devised an escape plan for us because as the victors, they took a lot of our land and any valuable wealth that we may have. So we were lacking in resources, nutrition, and everything. So he had to think of it as an escape plan for us. And he partnered with someone to have a vessel, and he built the boat engine for us to leave. And we spent 5 days at sea with 55 people on board, and I was the youngest. I was 3 years old, going on 4 at the time. And after about 5 days at sea, we came to Kuala Lumpur refugee camp in Malaysia. And from there, because of his service to the United States government as well as the South Vietnamese Army, he was able to provide his service number to the U.S. Embassy there. And we were able to seek asylum to the U.S. And we came to Arlington, Virginia in 1981, November 22nd, I believe, to Arlington, Virginia. And that's where our journey began in the U.S. So, as refugees, as immigrants with no little known of the language or culture, my parents started a family for us. There was 5 of us. My mom was pregnant with my little brother and my oldest sister and my 2 older brothers and myself. So that's how we started our journey in America, Kelly.
Tuan, it's an incredible story. It's your story. It's the power of your narrative. When you got here and started growing up, you're the age of 3. Obviously, you don't really have a full understanding of what's going on at the time. But what did your mother and father tell you about those moments of fleeing what then became a communist regime in order to
Yeah.
get to the United States to exercise your faith, your freedom, and your hope for a better tomorrow?
Yeah, my mom, she always brought us together and said that this is all we have. You know, we're all we have is each other. My brother and sisters, we hardly ever fought because when we did, that's what my mom would do. She would rally us together and say that uh, we're all we have. We can't fight among each other. You know, and then it's like the Israelite leaving Egypt when Moses always remind them when we're together, the God who brought us out of Egypt, who brought us out of slavery. My mom would always remind us that, when your father was, incarcerated by the communist government, we're all we have to take care of each other. Now that we went on this journey to this country, we're all we have. And it's always a motivation for us to stick together, to be tighter, but also now we are in a foreign place and with foreign languages, foreign food, and different cultures. We have to be able to understand who we are and where we are at, and the resiliency to work to establish ourselves, in this new place. But also, my parents lived an example of just being hard workers, man. Being gone most of the time because they were hustling. My mom was cleaning bathrooms, being a maid. My dad was cleaning churches. He was mowing grass, fixing cars, just working odd end jobs. Just seeing them hustle constantly, and just trying to provide a dream for us. But it was still better than what we had in Vietnam at the time. So knowing that and seeing that, I never wanted to forget the sacrifice they made for us to be able to have this opportunity in this country of freedom. And you really get to have that ability that you can be an immigrant, being a refugee that don't speak the language or having the resources and still have an opportunity. And I think that's all my mother and father ever wanted, was just to have an opportunity to live a better life for them and also for their kids. So we're just grateful for this opportunity to be here. And I can feel and I can see in them motivation every day, even though we didn't have anything. When people say, I come to America with the clothes on my backs and have anything, I really witnessed that with my family. We literally didn't have anything but the clothes on our backs. And just really the provision and God's grace and providence on our lives to be able to make it where we are and start with literally nothing, but have each other and the motivation and the commitment and resiliency to be better, to have a future in a space in a country that's allow us to do so.
And you said something that I have to go back to. You talked about how your mother would sit down with you and your siblings and say, we're all we've got. and you learned how to get together, even though you had some friction from time to time, as siblings often do. I'd like to, if you could take that and bottle that and give it to America, so we get over our
Yeah,
divisive politics and racial problems in this country, and realize that we're all we've got. And we
that's
have to
all we got,
stand
man.
together, because united we stand, divided we fall.
Yeah, that's one thing that for me growing up, when I first come to America, was really understanding that divisiveness in ideologies and why people didn't want us here. We came to America in the 80s. Not everybody embraced us. To be honest, not everybody embraced us. I didn't go to school till about a year and a half later, but my first interaction with the public school system was to tell me to go home.
Hmm.
And I didn't understand that, right? I understood the word goop before I understood the English meaning for it. But it was people's expressions when they say those things and those words that I knew it was a negative connotation on who I am as a person. But I didn't understand that concept. I just got to school. Why you want me to go home? Why you spray paint my locker? Like that doesn't make any sense, right? Or it just but the expressions of folks is what really stuck with me, and you become less open to who you are. You become isolated. So not all of America at that time was embracing who we are as immigrants, especially with the Vietnam conflict that cost so many American lives. But at such a young age, I didn't understand that concept. We're replacing government housing in a neighborhood that's already impoverished with other minorities when we were now the minority within the minority
Yeah.
community. And so it was a different concept for me to embrace, and I didn't respond as well as my other siblings did. And that's where my trajectory in life kind of started in a different way. But to be reminded of all we got, it really is something that I do now in the community, is to be able to love on my neighbors as love on ourselves, to be able to embrace the community at large with any service or a product that I'm providing, building a space where people come together, because that's the dream of what I want to be able to see for my small community, to go out to reach on a larger community and hopefully the country as well. But that's my motivation always.
And it's a great motivation. And you're right there in your shop, Viet 5 Coffee, there in Chicago. Uh, when I saw you many years ago, you were working for a very popular ad firm. I mean, you made it through college and all these wonderful things that you were able to accomplish, despite what you went through in the past. So, in your
Yeah,
present, now that you have Viet 5 Coffee, the name itself stands for you and your family. Talk to me about that,
yeah,
please.
yeah. So Viet 5 is literally the translation of Vietnam. When you say Vietnam, Nam means five in Vietnamese, right? But five is also in honor of my five siblings, our 5 days at sea. My dad's 5.5 years of re-education camp by the communist government. And also, our boat was measured 45 by 15 with 55 souls on board. I've also learned that in biblical context, the number five equates to grace. In numerology, it means making choices that leads to change, that leads to freedom. But really, grace for me is what I embrace, and the meaning of five is that equates to my personal journey, my life as a youth and teenager and a young adulthood into now. It's only by God's grace that I'm even be able to do this today, because God made the impossible possible in my life. So we get to share this story and journey every single day through Vid Five as a brand, as a company, as a coffee shop. We get to be able to share that every single day with the customers and guests that comes in here. Because I like to say that there's no strangers here. There's only friends we haven't met, right? So we want to create a space where people come in and welcome and then embrace our story. We build community through it, and we get to do it through the love of Vietnamese coffee.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Look, we're going to take a slight break. I want to come back on the other side of the break and talk to you more about who you were and who you are now, because we see the success. Let's break down that story a little bit more after the break. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to America's Hope. I'm Kelly Wright. I'm talking to Tuan Nguyen, who is the owner of Viet 5 Coffee in Chicago. You created a community. Everybody loves coffee. Let's have a good cup of coffee and talk about the great things about our nation and about each other. Is that what you're doing?
So we're introducing something, but also building a generational impact in what we're hoping to provide here for the city. And the community comes together from the suburbs to, the different 77 neighborhoods of the city, because we approach ourselves as global citizens of the world and not just, Chicagoans or just an Asian minority immigrant, because God looks at us as a globe, as this whole surface of earth with different. If God has placed His microphone into the world right now, He hears a singular voice of humanity, and I want to be able to approach it in that same way of just embracing people gracefully and also authentically being who we are.
Well, I keep saying it over and over again. It's a great story to tell, Tuan, and to see you there, right there in your space. You're working. We can hear people in the background. We know that the coffee's being made and it's being brewed. I'm thirsty for a cup of Joe. Or actually, after talking to you, I have to start calling it a cup of hope, because you definitely delivered it today, my friend. It's a cup of hope.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, only in America. As a refugee, as an immigrant, as minority, I'm also an ex-felon. To be able to import, grow, harvest, and import the coffee from a place of my birth to the United States, to a place where I now call home in Chicago, and create a business, create a community around what we're doing, and have the community embrace you, no matter what you've gone through. Yeah, your worst of moments. It's God reaches to the darkest of place to touch the hearts of men and women of across different spectrums. No matter how far you've gone, how far you've fallen. This place, though, this great country of ours will give you a space and a place and an opportunity to rebuild yourself and have your 10 toes solidly on the ground. If you so choose to have that fight, that resiliency, and that perseverance to succeed. And I'm just grateful every single day for that opportunity to do what we're able to do in this. I think it's the greatest city in the world. A lot of arguments will say, but I think we're in one of the greatest cities in the world. It's a global city. It's of different spectrums, left, right, center, whatever, of different walks of life in this one space, this concrete surface of ours we call Chicago, by one of the biggest large freshwater bodies in the entire world. It's here. And God put us here. God put me here, and I'm really grateful for that opportunity.
So, Tuan, what's your message to young America and even older America, and particularly to people who come out of incarceration and feel like they can't make it?
Man, I know your show is on hope. I always tell young people, do not lose hope on yourself. Right? A lot of times we face this up and downs and we settle. We lose a sense of hope. Having hopelessness is debilitating. Having hopelessness deters you from moving on and seeing the best in yourself. God created you in this way, but when we accept hopelessness, we are blinded to the great potential that we are. I always say it's tapped potential, not untapped potential, that when we're able to see ourselves, because our potential in the wholeness and greatness of what God's made us to be, man, we can face the impossible with confidence that for God is with you.
And that, my friend, that's something that I think a lot of people watching tonight will understand. No matter what you've done in your past, no matter what you're facing today, if you hold on to this wonderful gift called hope, you can persevere and you can overcome. And Tuan Nguyen, you're an example of that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing
Thank you, Kelly.
just a little smidgen of your story, because we could go on forever about all the great things that you've accomplished against all odds. And I just appreciate you being transparent and sharing your story with us.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for having me. I
Yeah,
appreciate
man.
giving me the platform to share, you know, and appreciate your friendship too, man, with you and your family and our family. We go way back, so I appreciate that.
I
Thanks for
love
always
that.
making that connection with us. Yeah.
Well, I'm overdue for a visit to Chicago, so I've got to come out there, as I stated
Let's
before,
go.
and have a good cup of hope.
Yes, we got you right here.
All right. Welcome to America's Hope. I'm Kelly Wright, and we're joined tonight by Brittany Noe. She is a project manager with the 412th Communications Squadron at Edwards Air Force Base in California, and she's responsible for management and implementation of its projects across the entire test wing organizations. Brittany, it's good of you to join us here. Your story is more than just what you do. It's really about the power of your narrative in coming to America in the first place. As I understand it, you were with family members fleeing South Vietnam during the fall of Saigon. If you can, take me back to those days. You were considerably younger then, but what do you recall?
Yes. Today and always, I do not forget the sacrifices that were made by the U.S. and Vietnamese soldiers and the compassion of Americans who enabled my family's escape and the livelihood of so many refugees. I could tell you the turbulent story of the dangers we faced and the sacrifices that led to our escape here. But in the interest of time, I'm going to give you a very abridged version of my family's journey. I came into this world not surrounded by the comfort of a bassinet, but rather the sound of persistent shelling. With the assistance of a CIA agent, my family was given the opportunity to flee the country by plane shortly before the airports were bombed to prevent escape. As to not alert would-be spies, we were snuck into the airport in clandestine fashion in specially marked vans. There we sat in a large hangar awaiting direction, not knowing if at any moment we would be captured and over to the North Vietnamese. And assuredly, my father would have been killed or placed in a communist re-education camp, as they called it, due to his time fighting alongside the Americans. So every moment was one of fear, trepidation, surrounded by chaos. And eventually my family was boarded onto buses, and we were immediately instructed that once the doors opened, to run with every ounce of strength towards a rolling C-130 on the runway. Hundreds of refugees sprinted, and men and women shielding babies and children. The wind from the jets are so powerful that it pushed back with such force that many could barely even stand. And we were flanked by U.S. soldiers who were there to protect us to the best of their ability. And as the cargo doors closed, there stood the last semblance that we would ever see of our nation once free. And in this cargo plane, there's a normal payload of about 100 troops, and now it's filled to triple capacity with refugees, wall to wall, seated on the floor, standing. My father, who had to hold me on nearly one leg for the duration of the flight. There's no air conditioning, sweltering hot at low altitudes, freezing when we traversed into 30,000 feet. And my father was really uncertain if I was dead or alive because I was only 6 weeks old. We went to Clark Air Force Base, to Wake Island, and eventually to Camp Pendleton, where young Marines were tasked with leveling fields of grass to set up refugee camps in Quonset huts. As you all know, those corrugated steel structures. And these Marines provided supplies, serving food to thousands of displaced. And they did so with such dedication and compassion, despite rampant communication and cultural barriers amongst one of the most controversial wars in history. Yeah. And my mother just remembers that the Vietnamese had never seen an apple before, so they could not be more thankful for a fruit so delectable. Yes.
And the stories that your family instilled in you, the values that they instilled in you, you developed this love for America, adopting it as your home. Why?
I strive to give back to our nation and the warfighters due to my gratitude for the freedoms that I have today. It's my desire to spend the rest of my days protecting this great nation, leveraging every opportunity granted to me to advance as part of the world's greatest Air Force. I've made it my mission to honor our military and veterans with particular affection for those from the Vietnam War era, both U.S. and South Vietnamese. I find inspiration from my history and the freedoms I have today, and there's not a single day that goes by when I'm at Edwards Air Force Base where I'm not in a perpetual state of awe. I watch the world's most sophisticated aircraft take off into the skies, and I wonder, how did a Vietnamese child of immigrant parents end up on one of the most secure flight lines in the world? And so when I recently participated in a C-17 egress exercise, I sat there blinded by tears with how unfathomable it is for me to be a project manager supporting testing efforts in a C-17 when nearly 50 years ago, I was an infant in a C-130 trying to escape the aftermath of war. And that is the beauty of this great nation, that I realize that every day I've been given an opportunity that I will not squander. I choose to dedicate my life and career to defending that which makes this American life and this American dream possible.
Brittany, that's a wonderful story about your reality. And, you know, when you look at the landscape of politics in America and the divisions that we have in our country, people complaining and grumbling at each other, what is it you would like them to know?
Oh my goodness. I'd like them to know that for those who seek it, the American dream is real. It's been a reality for me to pursue this relentless pursuit to give back to our warfighters and espousing my eternal gratitude for this incredible journey that's led this Vietnamese refugee from Saigon to sharing my American sojourn with everyone here today. This isn't simply a job. This is my home. And I don't have anything to prove, whether I'm an Asian individual, whether I'm a woman. All I have to prove is that when push comes to shove, I bleed red, white, and blue for the most perfect of imperfect nations. And that being our country.
Yeah, you remind me of course, our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, where we're constantly striving to become a more perfect union. And your family, when they tell you the stories about what they had to flee, especially fleeing a communist regime that, as you mentioned, would have incarcerated your father for a re-education program, which we heard from another guest that could have gone on for at least 5 years or more. And then you see the threat from the CCP and how they are persecuting people because of their religious backgrounds or their whatever they practice that does not adhere to the state. You really make it very clear why we should hold true to the values of American values and hope.
Absolutely.
So when you're working, you were also a member of the Army, as I understand, the National Guard.
I am part of the California State Guard in the cyber unit.
In the cyber
So
unit.
I'm
Okay.
a volunteer. So I'm a civilian with the Air Force. And then I also chose to volunteer with the California State Guard, which is part of the Army Component Command.
What are your concerns for the nation? You see that there's a threat against the nation from within. There's also, of course, threats that we have from outside of the nation with some of our adversaries watching us very closely and looking for an opportunity to perhaps unseat our power in this world and the hope that we spread throughout the world.
I know I sound like a broken record, but I think that what holds me and keeps me grounded is that I cannot forget the sacrifices made by those who enabled my escape to this country and the freedoms I'm afforded today. Maybe I'm fortunate enough to have been in a circumstance where I could have not had a single ounce of freedom ever. And I realize that now that I've been able to accomplish what I have. Having grown up in poverty to where I am today, it's just something that I've had to experience and enables me not to take anything for granted.
And you
I,
haven't you
yeah.
haven't taken anything for granted. Talk to me about your education and how, as you mentioned, you grew up in poverty, and look at where you are today.
Well, when my family first came here, again, with the kindness of American citizens who helped sponsor our family and so many others, we were able to get back on our feet, meaning my father was a distinguished engineer and scholar in Vietnam. He came to this country, and one of the first jobs that he had was at 7-Eleven as a
Mm.
cashier. And he was swindled on his first day, you know, and as a cashier by a dubious customer. And if you think about that, and despite any type of racism, despite any type of barriers that he experienced, he continued on his path, and he became an engineer over here in America once again. So when you talk about opportunity and you talk about the support and assistance that we receive from not only this nation allowing us to be here, coming over here, the citizens here who helped us, but then also the hard work that despite skin color, despite gender, despite background, cultural differences, if you just work hard and work through it, you can still succeed in this country, which now explains how my father, an immigrant whose first job was at 7-Eleven, now has a daughter who graduated from, UC Irvine, who, has a master's degree from the University of Maryland Global Campus, and now works for the Air Force and gives back to the country by doing so as a civilian and serving with the Army. It all comes full circle. And so going back to your original question, what is it that I would want to remind this country is that all these freedoms that were afforded to an immigrant family, that's the American dream. That's what we strive to protect every day.
And those freedoms, by the way, and thank you for saying that, those freedoms are available to all Americans.
Yes.
Your spirit is infectious and contagious. Your positivity, and it's just brimming with hope and faith in this nation. And does it matter in terms of our leadership, however, because people are fighting on the left, they're fighting on the right, conservatives and liberals fighting each other? The bottom line is we still have a country that can lead the way and show the way to actually appreciating each other and being that light for the world to see.
Ronald Reagan once said that America is the last bastion of freedom. And it truly is. And when you talk about the last bastion of freedom, we are also the last bastion of hope. This country is built on hopes and dreams. And maybe if I hadn't gone through it myself, maybe I would not realize the value of it all, having been born here and having not realized what it means to not have all the freedoms and the opportunities because they were always there to begin with. I hope that what people see, however, is that there is infighting in this country to the extent that some people maybe don't realize how wonderful and amazing this country is. And opportunities that you've given me here to build that hope, I am so grateful for, and to help people understand that the American experience is so diverse. There are people who are born here and have never known anything different, and there are people like myself who have had to struggle their whole lives as well. Nothing is right, nothing is wrong at the end of the day. What's at the end of the day, I would hope, is everybody understands how grateful that they must be for their life in this country and support those pillars that support that and those people who defend our country to maintain that. Some time ago, I went on an honor flight, and I was sitting next to a World War II veteran. He's 101 years old. His name is Bernard James. And I asked him, "Sir, you could convey a message to our youth of all your learnings in your life, what would it be?" He thinks to himself, he goes, "The first 100 years are the hardest." And I can't stop laughing to this day. My poor dear Bernard James, he passed away about a year or 2 years ago. But that said, he really put everything into perspective. Life
He
is
sure
difficult.
did.
He did, didn't he? And life is difficult for all of us. For all the trappings that I or anybody else proclaim to have, in my bio, no matter how illustrious someone's history is, whatever the case may be, life is challenging. But again, I have to reiterate that it is challenging, but I'm fortunate enough to have that life in the most perfect of imperfect nations, that being the United States of America. And I never forget that.
Brittany, you are amazing. I love that story, by the way. And I do love those honor flights. And every time that I fly into Ronald Reagan Airport, depending on what part of the terminal I go into, there's one particular terminal where you'll see those honor flights coming in, and you can always tell because the American flags are waving, and people are standing in line as these veterans get off their flight to walk through a parade of people who are cheering them on and thanking them for their valuable service to defend this nation. Because we've heard it before, freedom is not free. You have to fight for it. You have to defend it. And I just love this conversation that you and I are having about the fact that you appreciate this freedom. And as I said, it's contagious. And more people need to, I think, see your smile, see your integrity, and see the warmth that you have. Because no matter what gets you down, you're still going to rise up to be positive.
I'm going to try. I'm going to definitely
you got to try.
That's what America's Hope is about. Ultimately, I hope that my story helps inspire gratitude in others as well. And I'm grateful for this platform to be able to do so.
Well, I'm grateful for you. Look, I know you, I was watching one of the things that you did in the past. I think it was, maybe 10 years ago. You had a group of girlfriends, and all of you were dressed in white. You go around and doing a lot of great things for the city in terms of philanthropy, trying to give to people and help people. Are you still doing that, or are you doing more than you did then? Before I let you go, I've just got to say thank you for your service in serving and helping the members of the Air Force. I'm sure they're proud of you there at Edwards Air Force Base. And I know that you're doing great things throughout your community. And thank you for giving the gift of hope and sharing it. It's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you.
All right, Brittany Noe, thank you so much. We appreciate you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Have
Best
a
to you
wonderful.
always. Okay.
Thank you. God bless America.
Amen to that. We'll be back in a moment. And welcome back to America's Hope. So my final word tonight is based on something that Edward Graham said when he was talking about Samaritan's Purse being on the ground in Hawaii. He said, pray for Maui, and that is what we must do. And then from Tuan, Nguyen and Brittany Noe, we heard their resiliency and their perseverance as they faced devastation and the crisis during the fall of Saigon. But they still came to America where they found hope. And so all three of the guests tonight would say, be united and ignited to keep spreading hope and love and freedom and peace in the most dire of circumstances. Never let go of hope, America. I'm Kelly Wright. Until next time, good night. Your America and my America.
United we stand, divided